Namaste, good afternoon. Today I want us to talk about the process, at least my process. That's all I can really address and share. And the process, what by the process I mean? The process of discovery. I had this first, I took a look at the world and I had to first discover what it isn't, what it is not. It's not this, it's not that, it's not this, it's not this. Through a whole process of, and the ultimate, so by subtraction, you end up with the is, the isness. What is? What is awakening? What is life? What is the soul? What is our birthright? And we start to learn in the process of what isn't. I have a quote here from Immanuel Kant. Over the eons, folks have known that we don't preserve the world, we don't perceive the world as it is. Objects arrange themselves according to our perceptions. So we pretty much see the world how we experience ourselves and get confused. And there comes a time, I think in all of our lives, there comes a time. Today's talk is I call Beckons. And it's the beckons of the forgotten. The sense that you experience anew, but somehow it's separate from yourself, and the separation, the division, the jealousy, the competition, the futility, the sorrows of life, the illnesses. Sometimes we start to think that this is life itself. But at some point, when something beckons you, the call calls to you, and what called to me, beckoned to me, it's the song of the universe. That's what I call it. I kept hearing something that's the isness, I guess, the is. What is? And also to connect what is that thou art. That isness is what we are. And I experienced this by hearing this song of the universe, I call it. It beckoned to me like the sirens of Greek mythology, calling you, beckoning you. And in this beckoning, what happened for me is that grace, being in a grace awakens a deep sense of reverence, of commitment, of respect, this grace of loving. And I felt it as light, the grace of light. And it just, my heart grew larger. And it was kind of a hint. It was kind of a hint, wasn't it? And along the way, certain people have resonated with me a lot. Bhagavan Sri Rama is one of them. And he said that something that really struck me, a higher power is leading you. Let it. It knows what to do and how to do it. Trust it. And in this process, I want to address some of the things, the questions, some of the things that I personally dealt with. And I thought, well, I had this really weird feeling that, I wanted to become a Buddha. This was the language I used because Buddha resonated with me. I was always drawn to Eastern mysticism, Eastern traditions, Eastern philosophies, and studied from a very young age. But I always thought that this was something that, the two things I thought was clarity, and I thought clarity of thinking. Okay? Be clear in my thoughts. Because that it tends to be very fuzzy. And now I've grown to love this characteristic. Not only I never want to change it, but I thought that it was kind of a mastery of the sentences that a Buddha would, be always in a state of equanimity, and emotions would be on even keel. And I learned that equanimity is possible, but I also learned that emotions are natural and we can't escape them. But what we can do is to not endeavor to not let them master us by becoming aware of them, by learning them, by knowing them, and ultimately understanding them. And another thing I've learned about the dissolution of the ego. So much to learn, but it's fun. It's the process. Couldn't be any other way. And the question I had, is, can you be a Buddha and have emotions? Can you be a Buddha and get angry? Can you be a Buddha and still have an ego? Because it's always told about the dissolution of the ego. And that made as little sense to me as dismantling the mind, silencing the mind, quieting the mind, stilling the mind. I mean, the mind always seems like such a fine tool. And I never was successful at this. 33 years of rigorous Zen sitting led me to only surrender, to give up this idea that I could control. The monkey mind was always there. And so this about the ego. We need the ego. Eliminating the ego is not entirely the point. Once you see through a mirage, this is what the point is. See through a mirage and recognize a mirage as a mirage. An ego is a mirage. There is no need to try to get rid of the mirage. It no longer causes a confusion or suffering. Walk on, as Christmas Humphreys, my favorite British early Buddhist, said. Walk on. And in addition to, just like the mind, some semblance of ego is needed just to answer to your name when called. The ego becomes a helpful servant and no longer master. The body, mind, even ego sense does not have to vanish. Only the feeling of I and the feeling of that this I is a separate entity. That's the key. Who needs some state or wants something to vanish. So your task is it's the transformation process. It's not to eradicate the ego, but to purify it, transform it into a vessel for eternity. So if you transcend your identity with your mind, you will then identify with the soul. This advanced spiritual stage. Now that your mind can and will likely go on operating as it needs to, it's your mind, it's necessary. So there's the ego in the mind. Persist. The mind's nature is movement and thus thinking. But here's the key. You will no longer identify yourself with the mind and its thoughts. It's just a tool to be utilized. We're given tools, not many, but we're given some. We might as well use them. You will now be in a state of existence, totally out of the realm of time and movement. Escaping the cycles of time, the idea of time. Space-time continuum, as the quantum physics was, space-time continuum. To escape the confines. There's the limits, the so-called limits of natural laws. And eventually, once you identify with the soul and not the mind, that too, like everything else, the time will come when you need to stop identifying with your soul. I had a long-going conversation from birth with my soul, my higher self, I might call it. But you have to transcend this. Like, this is always about transcending. Your soul will still be there, don't worry. It must. It's your soul. And what's some of the preparation? Well, here again, here's another favorite. Ramana Maharishi talks about preparation. And this is where Bhakti, Jnana, Karma, and Raja Yoga come in. He adopted all of them, but it's basically answering the question, who am I? And a teacher, who's your teacher? This is another preparation. A teacher's ability to be clear doesn't translate into attracting many listeners. Boy, I know this. Seekers say they wish to end their own seeking, but subconsciously the ego is doing everything to avoid its own demise. Thus, seekers often find themselves tremendously attracted to very vague teachers, as the ego wants to keep the separation by seeing the teacher as having something they don't. The ego wants to keep it this way so that seeking can persist. It lives off the idea that something is missing for seekers, that something is enlightenment. Also, don't forget, there isn't a single path. There are many paths, as there are people. Each dream character lives out a story. That story may or may not include awakening. And even awakening is but an event in a dream. It's when a character who thinks she is in a dream realizes that she's the dreamer. Her dream story of awakening will be what it will be, if it will be. It's all up to the dreamer. She is a character, not the doer. She's being dreamed. So look forward to some things that could happen on this path. You could become free, and you realize you've always been free. You walk through the prison door that didn't exist. If the truth doesn't free you, it's not the truth. If you had a major revelation but a minor insight, it makes all the difference. You already knew the love of God is all there is.